How is everyone doing today? Welcome back to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Manny Mardiege, live today on Friday, September the 13th, to bring you guys the last show of this week to go over some more of the game that we saw last night heading into week 2. We're going to go through the full slate today and talk in depth about a couple of the games on today's show, starting off with the game last night, right, between the Bills and the Dolphins. We're going to get into breaking all of that stuff down in the next couple segments. We're going to talk about the Bengals and Chiefs game and also some last-minute news here on the injury update as well heading into week 2. So stay tuned. There's a lot more coming up on today's show. And before I do get started on last night's game, I tell you guys every day, every time we're on here, if you guys have a question, comment, or any opinion you'd like to share during the show, we want to hear about it. Don't hesitate to let us know what you're thinking. Your input is a big part of what makes this show great, and we thrive on your energy and insights. Whether it's a quick comment, question, or opinion, it doesn't matter. Let us know what you're thinking. Now, if you want to make sure that your message stands out and it gets featured on the show, there's an easy way to go about that. Just use the new Super Chat feature. Just click the $ at the bottom of the chat box to send in your Super Chat. This guarantees that your message gets on the air, and it's also a fantastic way to support our channel. We rely on your support to keep bringing you the sports content you love, and we appreciate every bit of it. So go ahead, let us know what you're thinking. Hit the Super Chat button, and let's keep this show as exciting and as interactive as ever. But we still do have the alternate option, the old tip and donations link, GSMCPodcast.net, which you can still use to tip, donate, and leave a comment or question there if you do prefer. We couldn't do this without your amazing support, and we're so thankful to have you guys as part of our community. Please use that Super Chat feature and be part of our show here today. But now we can dive into what we saw last night, right? There was a game last night, obviously, between the Bills and the Miami Dolphins, but the biggest news of everything, the event was the game, right? But the biggest piece of news was Tua Tagovailoa, the quarterback for the Miami Dolphins, and how he suffered another concussion in his NFL career with, basically, if you weren't watching the game like I was, with 4 minutes and 36 seconds left in the third quarter. The game was pretty much out of reach at this point, but even still, the starters were still out there, obviously, and it was a 4th and 4, basically, around the Bills' 14-yard line. Tua trying to get the first down, the Miami Dolphins going for it, obviously, at this point. So Tua, no options are open. He drops back, then he steps up into the pocket. He tries to run forward towards the first down, and, he gets it, but he ends up getting hit by Damar Hamlin coming up to tackle him. And Andre, thanks for joining the show. Do you think he should retire? I'm going to get to that in just a second. But just let me break it down a little bit for some people that might not have watched it. Damar Hamlin comes up and, tries to tackle him. Tua dives head first pretty much into his chest, into his midsection, and that's where everything, turned pretty scary because from that point on, you saw Tua lay on his back. He really couldn't get up at all. His hands went into the, the fencing position, as they call it. And we saw it last time in Cincinnati, I believe, with him. And now we're seeing it again. He struggled to get up, but it wasn't, I think, as scary, obviously, as before. Because last time he was stretchered off, but now he was able to get up after some time, after receiving some medical attention. He walked off under his own power with a little bit of a limp, and afterwards, obviously, he was diagnosed with a concussion, and that was all a scary moment, right? And how everything broke down afterwards. Mike McDaniel said, his head coach, that I'm just worried about the human being. I was just worried about my guy. It's not something you ever want to be a part of. You hope not to. And he also said that the last thing he's thinking about is a timetable, a time return for Tua after this. He just wants to make sure Tua's all right personally. And then you had the flood of reactions online, some well wishes from Damar Hamlin, Louis Riddick, Shannon Sharp, Des Bryant and Deion Dawkins on the other side of everything, expressing their well wishes and just talking about what they saw. And in those comments, I'll get to your question, Andre. The conversation now inevitably is, should he retire? And Andre, you also said, I just don't get why he's still not sliding. He lost weight to be quicker, just to not slide. And I do agree with that. It's weird because Tua's like obviously not the most athletic guy, and he did go through all that stuff. Getting leaner to be quicker to potentially do some more athletic things, right? But the biggest thing for him was to slide, right? In that moment, you kind of understand, the adrenaline and everything trying to come back, even though the game's kind of out of reach, why you just want to get it. So you kind of dive and not really think twice about it. But with him, he's been in this situation so many times that, they always teach you, I'm sure they always stress it, to dive feet first. And for him to dive basically head first into Damar Hamlin was confusing. But, from that point on, it turned pretty scary. And should he retire? I think it's going to be a conversation, surely, because not only has it happened again, but after the last time, I think in 2022, around December, I want to say, Tua came out and said that it was floated around a little bit, the idea of him retiring. And now with this happening again, it's going to have to come up again, right? With his family, with himself, just internally. I don't think the Miami Dolphins will ask him if he's going to retire or if he's considering it, but it's surely going to come up again. Everyone's going to talk about it now going forward, and I'm not going to say if he should or shouldn't. I could say something, what I think, but ultimately, I think you don't really know a good answer to that unless you've actually played football, for a couple reasons that I will touch on a little bit. But it's certainly going to be a very serious conversation to have now, because this is his third concussion now, and it almost gets to a point where you're very fortunate enough with how delicate everything is with the brain and the trauma and some long-term injuries football players can sustain. It comes to a point, I just thought of it before, of how you can reach a point to how many times can you dodge the bullet until it ultimately ends up hitting you, right? He's become very fortunate to have this happen to him a couple times. He's been able to come back each time, but I'm sure there comes a point where you're thinking, all right, this is the third or fourth time now. What's the next hit potentially going to be like? What's going to happen if I do get hit next time, potentially even harder? Because the hit that he had on Damar Hamlin, it's almost like Tua hit him with his head, the way that he dove at him. And this time, he was able to get up and walk away, right? He didn't look that hurt, but it was a concussion. And now you start thinking, if you're Tua, I'm assuming, is that what's the next hit going to be like, right? What if next time somebody actually does slam him down like before, or somebody just runs into his head trying to tackle him or something like that? No one's thinking about protecting Tua when they're trying to go tackle him. Sometimes a big hit just happens, and he was able to walk away this time, but you kind of have to think how fortunate and how lucky you are, and if you're going to continue to be like that going forward. And then if you're thinking like that also, I don't think that's the way to play the game, honestly. No one's thinking twice, second guessing on how to hit this guy a little bit easier. Everyone's just going off of instinct. The game is so fast and so violent that you can't control those things, so you kind of have to think back and regroup and kind of put that into consideration as well. And again, the scariest part for me was that hit wasn't that bad. So the next time he gets slammed or something like that, or just run into somebody, he's on the ground or something, and somebody tramples over him, something like that. You can never plan for stuff like that, so that's really what worries me. And talking about retirement and things like this, for everyone, to give their opinion, it's hard. It's hard, like I said before, because this is pretty much everything for these players, and Tua's only 26 years old, right? He'll be allowed to play again. I'm sure he's going to pass all the protocols, however long that may take, but at some point it becomes, should he come back, not whether or not he is able to come back, because he's going to be able to come back, but the question of should be, talked about with his family. And it's hard, again, because you don't really know unless you're playing football at this level, especially because this is pretty much, I don't really know how long he's been playing, has been his life for forever, for all of his life pretty much, how much his family's invested in it, even still to this day. This is his daily, like, dopamine intake, right? This is the why for him. This is why he gets up, why he sort of has a purpose in life. The bonds that he's built with, we heard before when he was talking about Brian Flores and now Mike McDaniel, that relationship, those bonds, to just walk away from it is extremely tough. The debt he might feel to the Miami Dolphins for trying to repay them, trying to show his gratitude towards them for giving him this generational type of contract for him to just retire afterwards. I'm sure it's tough to juggle all of that, and I'm not saying he shouldn't just because of the money, but it's something that I think a lot of people can't really answer without being in that position, especially at 26 years old. If you just close the chapter right there, you still feel like you have so much more to give, and it feels almost unfair in a way that you feel like you could go, but again, in the same time, your body or something else is telling you you can't. So to say that he should or shouldn't retire, that's going to be up to him. He should do what he feels is best for him. I'm sure his family's going to have a lot to say about it. But for now, I'm sure the Dolphins should probably place him on IR, give him at least those 4 weeks to not be close to the team, not be thinking about football or anything like that. And then after that, we'll see where we are. But definitely a scary moment with Tua happening again, with, this being a critical time. Still so early on. It's not like the Dolphins could just throw in the season. But still, on the field stuff is probably the last thing on everyone's mind. And hopefully Tua does get better from this. I know he's going to get better, but hopefully he makes the decision that is sitting well with everyone, that he feels confident in making, and also just, can feel at peace with ultimately, because it is extremely tough. We'll be keeping touch on how everything goes, but that was certainly the biggest piece of news from last night's game. But we can't have this show, obviously. Moving on now to the reaction to that show. We're going to go to a break right now, and then once we come back, we're going to talk about reviewing everything that we saw yesterday on the field, how the Bills looked, a little bit about the Dolphins, and that sort of thing coming up right after this break. You're listening to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.